Oh my God, here we are at nonhalloffame.com, and we are doing something a little bit special. We are looking at what happens over the last 24 hours. It's episode 1 of everything that we're doing, and as we're doing this, I'm looking at, oh my God, in the world of hockey. In the world of hockey, we have a new gold champion. And in the world of college basketball, we have somebody who decided that you were not the champion. With me today is Chris Mouradian and my good friend, Longhorn Dave. How are you doing?
Excellent. Ready to roll.
So let's look at the world of hockey. In terms of what we saw recently, Ovechkin is the new gold champion. What do we think of that? Is that awesome? Is that terrible? What do we think politically? Because there is some political stuff here.
I think it's a good thing. I've always been under the impression, taught that records are made to be broken.
Okay.
So this was one that most people thought would never be broken. To actually be able to see it happen, not in person, but at least on the television yesterday, was pretty exciting. First time that I kind of cheered an Ovechkin goal, being a Canucks fan. But just to see something like that and to be able to enjoy it, and the ceremony afterwards was really, really nice to see. And I thought Gretzky did a fantastic job of, kind of tying Gordie Howe in as well, with how he passed Gordie Howe, and now Ovechkin's passing Gretzky, and it was a really nice tribute and something fun to see and something great for the sport of hockey.
Yeah, I would echo what Chris said. I think it was great. I didn't know what to expect in terms of how they would handle the ceremony. It was probably a little more than I expected. They stopped the game for some half an hour and they brought out carpets, but at the end of it, all the right people were there. Gretzky was there, the commissioner was there, his family, his kids, of a really adorable age, when they're just they probably don't really realize what they just saw, at that particular age. But to touch on a little about what you talked about, Kirk, the record is made to be broken. I think most people will probably consider Howe and Gretzky some of the two greatest players of all time, and probably not consider maybe Ovechkin there. Just from a historical standpoint, I think we always seem to value prior generations over ours. Whole different show on whether LeBron is better than Michael Jordan, or whether Bonds is better than Aaron, that type of thing. But I think Ovechkin did it in a mid-market, not in a huge market, but he's won a Stanley Cup. He did it, by all counts, cleanly. He scored goals, consistently over years and years and decades. And to think, to get to this level, roughly 900 goals, 45 goals a year for 20 years is just an incredible thing with the injuries. I think the game's gotten more physical, go back to the Gretzky era, and he had some goons on his team that would keep him pretty clean. If anybody messed with them, they were getting a face full of glove there. And that's the way the game was played. But I think the game, it's more physical, but also I think it's a little bit more clean now. I think he had more space and things like that. So there's a lot into it, but I think they handled it well. The fact that he's a Russian, I didn't see any, or he's really a Soviet guy born before the wall even came down, but I didn't see any negative attitude towards him. Everybody was cheering for him. Nobody was saying, who's this guy? He's been an ambassador of the game, him and Crosby, since they came in. So I think overall it was fun to watch. It's good for the game. I hope they're able to launch this into the playoffs. The Caps are going to be in the middle of the playoffs with a lot of other big name teams. I hope hockey's able to leverage this and get more eyes on the playoffs than maybe they have in the years past.
There were some players, ex-players, who were sort of like had an issue with that. I'll get there later. In terms of this overall greatness, what do we think here? Like for me personally, like I never would have thought that Wayne Gretzky's record would have been passed.
I would have thought maybe Crosby would have had a better shot just as a, as another Canadian, as a guy that just grew up in the game, came in young. Of the two of them, he seemed to have a better or a more clear path and maybe more injuries, just more, not quite the top-notch goal production. But, again, I don't think Ovechkin's the top 2 or 3 player of all time, but certainly with this particular stat, he's in the conversation of starting 6th great of all time.
Well, there's a group that we have that Paul sort of, our friend Paul Lawrence sort of like discussed. And he said, like, is Alexander Ovechkin in the top 5 of this group? And his group was Mario Lemieux, Wayne Gretzky, Bobby Orr,
Gordie Howe.
Gordie Howe, thank you. And for me personally, it's like, ooh, no, but he's damn close. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you can make the argument that he's obviously the greatest goal scorer of the game, but I don't know that he's top 5 greatest players of all time. And, kind of thinking about that, it's always kind of been Gretzky or Howe, as far as, in my mind, the 3 greatest players of all time. It's kind of tough comparing eras like that with the way the game was played, but I kind of think Bobby Orr, just being the overall defenseman, carrying that part of the game in, as well as being able to be the leader, the scorer, everything for Boston. Kind of always leaned to him as a little bit more of a greatest player of all time, as opposed to Gretzky, who's just maybe the greatest offensive player of all time.
No, fair. And that's sort of like how I would look at Gretzky. And like for me personally, Bobby Orr is the GOAT. Saying that, I don't think I'm wrong saying that Alexander Ovechkin is the GOAT of snipers.
The GOAT of what was that?
Snipers.
Snipers, yeah.
Yeah, just like the hockey player who knows how to get it in the net. Wherever you are, he can get there.
Yeah, even this week, he's getting towards the end of the season. There was some question, particularly when he was out for a month or 5 weeks with a knee injury, and was he going to get to it this year? Nobody thought he kind of would at the beginning of the year, and he started scoring like he was, 30 or 29 again instead of 39. And then just this week he's had a goal. I think he played 4 games, 5 goals in 4 games, including the 2 the game before, and he just was, an unstoppable scorer. It's just a scoring machine, so to speak. Like you said, I would agree with everything you said. Is he a top 5 all-around player? Maybe not, but I would put him in the top 5 all-time players, just weighting that scoring that he's done over other guys. But I liken to, if you try to make an all-time Major League Baseball outfield, how do you reconcile Mays, Aaron, Ruth, and Ted Williams? And one of those 4 has got to not be in your outfield. Any one of those 4, right, you'd say, well, they've clearly got to be, and that puts aside Bonds and some other guys. So anyway, it's an embarrassment of riches. Comparing generations, as you said, is difficult, but I think certainly his legacy now as the top goal scorer, probably for the foreseeable future, if not the infinite future, is going to carry a lot of weight.
Now, something that sort of like took place a few days ago was from Dominic Hasek. I'm not sure if both of you sort of like saw that, but Dominic was very against the idea of Ovechkin sort of like taking over the greatest goal scorer from Wayne Gretzky, and he went 2 levels here. Ovechkin is a friend of Vladimir Putin. Allegedly. I don't know. They hung out. I'll leave that here. And he took over that from Gretzky, who was somebody who, well, let's just say a certain president said, hey, you could be the governor of this country. Okay. From Canada, guys, I'm just playing with this here. So we have those two things that are accurate, and Dominic Hasek said something that I did not agree with, and I love Hasek. I love him. I think he's the GOAT of international hockey, and if you want to put him in the Mount Rushmore of goalies in hockey, I think Hasek should be there. Saying that, do we want to sort of like have him imply that if you don't sort of like have a certain belief, you shouldn't be in the NHL? And that's kind of what he did, because he had an issue with any Russians being in the National Hockey League.
Chris, I'll let you take that one.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's a take. It's not one I would definitely agree with. I want to see the best players in the NHL across the board, whether they're Russian, Finn, Czech, American, Canadian, best on best. And to try to exclude one country because of something that players have zero control over is asinine. So, no, I disagree with what Hasek said there, and wish you to kind of rethink his opinion.
Yeah, I would echo that. I certainly the Olympics get into a whole nother discussion about, how do you handle these Russian athletes that just grew up competing and presumably doing it cleanly and don't get a chance or have to compete for some neutral country. I'm a keep sports away from politics type person. If you believe in left, right, this or that, if you're friends with somebody, it shouldn't exclude you. I don't want to see it take away from the moment and just to cast him or anybody in some sort of shadow in that regard. I disagree with, and the word asinine was used well.
No, interesting, because like we're not that far away from like a lot of people saying like you have to sort of have your political opinion on this. And
Right.
With what Hasek said, Hasek, who again I love, I think you're one of the greatest goalies ever. I really do. But when you're telling other people sort of like you can't play here, I'm struggling with that. Am I wrong here?
No, you're wrong at all.
Okay, I'm not wrong. Yeah.
No, you're not. You can be right this time.
The first. It's definitely a first. Okay, so with that, we are looking at something as we're recording this. We're probably a day after, but Dave, I'm glad you're here because like you've got your Houston your gear, and I think that for a lot of people, we were looking at Duke sort of like running the table in terms of the national championship. So I asked the two of you, did they choke, or did they overestimate or underestimate? And what do we think going forward for Houston?
Yeah, I'll start on this one. First of all, I think it's great you invite neutral fans to weigh in on, national issues that clearly have no bias. I'm also a Caps fan, so put that in your bucket too. But no, it was a great basketball game. I think it's a basketball game. You talk about the semifinal match with Duke. Like you said, as we're recording this, they're playing the finals with Florida now, so the result will be out, and we don't know whether they'll win at all or not. But that particular game, is going to go down as one of those big comebacks. We love college sports for that. It seems like in college football, basketball, you just get those comebacks that you don't see at the pro level quite the same way. Just with professional athletes can control the end of the game a little bit better. But was it? A lot of people around here in Houston say this is just Houston style. They smother you, they wear you down, they get you tired by the fourth quarter to where your legs are not out. And sure enough, Duke had the one field goal in the last 10 minutes. They were sloppy with the ball. They couldn't their cuts weren't as good. They were a step slow on defense. But there was a lot that other things that went into it too. I think I, for one, thought Duke was the best team, and filling out my brackets, I had Duke going all the way, just from a perspective of they just blew most teams out. They lost, one game after November, early December. But I think what also played into it was Houston played in a top to bottom better conference and played, half a dozen, 10 games where they came down to the end. All their Houston's losses were in overtime uh, lately, or at least in the conference, they lost the one game. So I think that came down to it, that they really didn't phase them. They were able to execute. Sampson coached brilliantly at the end with the way he did the inbounds and the passes. And, even Houston got out of earlier rounds with great finishes, and Duke just didn't have that, despite all the talent. I wouldn't say they choked. Were they flustered? Were they a little uncomfortable? Yeah, because Houston made them uncomfortable. The pressure that their defense has put on all teams this year put them in a position where they just weren't able to execute like we've seen Duke execute against the Virginias and the Wake Forests and even North Carolinas. It was just a little bit different flavor, and the end of the game was crazy. And I for one enjoyed the outcome.
Rightfully so.
I, for one, sort of like love our new leaders here. Yeah, that was a horrible Simpsons bit.
Simpsons reference. I got you there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Hey, Chris, help me out here.
Yeah, so in situations like this, it's never really just like one thing over another. It's a combination of things. And I think the biggest thing there is, Houston, they took it to them, and they were not intimidated. They fell behind, but they never gave up on themselves. They never stopped believing. And when the ball started rolling their way, so to speak, they're ready and took advantage of the opportunities. And Duke maybe said they got a little flustered. They maybe thought they were just okay, we can kind of just steer this one home here, and it's got a little bit closer, a little bit closer, and then it start to press a little bit, and next thing you know, it's Houston in the finals. And good for them. They came in, they did what they had to do. Dave, you obviously you've seen a lot more of their games than I'd probably say Kirk or I. So you know the team there, and you described them well as far as just not kind of being the battle tested of the bunch there, and be able to weather through the beginning of the game, and to be able to come out on the other end clean. That's it. So
yeah, I would say, one bounce here or there could have changed the game either way. I always think about, they talk about a team that loses at the end is choking. What about the team that got down by 10, 14 points by Houston? Were they choking in the first half and second half? No, it was just two heavyweights throwing haymakers, and Duke was knocking down shots and Houston wasn't, and the turnover balls falling their way. And then at the end, it fell a little bit differently. So I don't consider it choking per se. I just consider it, that's the way the ball goes, and momentum. We all know, well, at least I feel like in basketball, it's a big factor, is when things start going wrong, it can snowball quickly. A little bit, I don't know if you want to put coaching into it, but younger coach for Duke versus a more experienced coach for Houston could have been a factor as well. But at the end, it's the players, the bounces, the shots that decided it. And I could have gone either way, 50-50 game.
Well, and that's what we do the show. Episode 1 of everything that we do here. Thank you so much for checking this out. There's going to be so much more, and wherever you are, wherever you may be, guys, make it take out.